Picture yourself listening to your friend explaining why he loves his favorite game. Man, I get that people have their preferences and all, but Hollow Knight's music, it's just objectively the best. If you are analytically minded to any degree, you'll very likely take issue with the use of that word objectively in this context. Your friend was simply grasping for a powerful adverb to describe his experience, and objectively came to mind. He didn't actually mean to say that in some true, final, ultimately verifiable sense, Hollow Knight's soundtrack is the best. A lot of people aren't very fond of this flippant use of the word objective, and I think rightly so. It's certainly more than just an intensifier. But that same group of people to which you likely belong more often than not start and end their critical artistical analysis with this proposition. The quality of art is purely subjective, and that is one of the most tragically shallow statements I have ever heard. Consider which of these following statements are objectively true. 2 plus 2 equals 4. The Great War ended in 1918. Being run over by a car is not healthy. You might say that it's quite difficult to argue that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is not objectively true. In fact, if we can claim to know anything, then this statement sort of must be true, given that it is in fact an expression of pure logic. The reason that 2 plus 2 cannot really be anything other than 4 is because 4 and 2 plus 2 are both expressions that refer to the same concept. The statement is true by definition. P equals P. Is the Great War ended in 1918 an objective fact? Well, the fighting stopped in 18, but the Treaty of Versailles, which formally declared an end to the war, wasn't signed until 1919. So is it then untrue to say that the Great War ended in 1918? Or how about 1919? Certainly, neither statement can be objectively verified without further specification. What exactly is meant by the Great War? Do we consider the war having ended once the last bullet was fired? Once the final artillery shell made impact with the ground? Or once the smoke dissipated? And what if we don't specify each of these tiny, seemingly insignificant details? Can we even dare to speak about objective fact? People like to say that whether we can ever answer the question in practice, there is an answer in theory to questions like, when did the Great War end? But is that really true? Unless we're talking about pure logical truth, such as that expressed in mathematics, it should be clear that any application of the words objective truth is a pragmatic one, and as such, not objective in the ultimate sense. The Great War ended in 1918 is objectively true in the sense that it conveys useful, sufficiently accurate information about the world. In any other sense, it is not objectively true. Is the statement being run over by a car is not healthy objectively true? Well, it certainly appears to be, but how would you verify the claim? Do you conduct a statistical analysis of people who have been run over by cars and then correlate that with a measure of health? How do you define what exactly constitutes being run over? Because we obviously have to be exact. There's no room for leeway in an objective statement. And oh boy, how do we define health? With reference to the average human's welfare? What if science revealed that the average human is actually supposed to live 200 years and we're dying early because of some banal error in lifestyle choice? Would such a discovery then alter the definition of health? How are we supposed to utilize a malleable definition in determining anything objectively true? I hope you can see what I'm getting at. We like to imagine that we can clearly define what is and isn't objective, but I don't think most of us have any idea of how pragmatic we truly act in our everyday lives. Being run over by a car is not healthy is a true statement, or at least a useful heuristic, because we're better off believing it. Objective truth is not as precisely defined a category as we often tend to think. On my channel, I often engage very critically with games I love. Over the past 10 months, this has primarily been in regard to Hollow Knight. When I attack a specific feature in Hollow Knight, such as bosses with poor telegraphs, vague mechanics, or high reliance on luck, many people argue with me on the points I make. That's fantastic and I love it. For the rest of the comments, they usually fall into one of two categories. The first is roughly, "Hey, your analysis really struck a chord with me. I couldn't put into words the frustrations I was feeling, but when you put it like that, it makes sense. It resonates with me." While the second one is, "It's all subjective. You can't objectively claim that one Hollow Knight boss is better than another, or that any feature is poorly or well designed. It's art, and art is subjective." The great thing about this response for the respondent is that it is very easy to give. If all art is subjective and the words good and bad therefore do not apply to art in any cosmic sense, you don't have to contend with any of my arguments. You can just tell me that it's my personal opinion and has nothing to do with somebody else's and go about your day. It's easy, right? It's so easy. So, is it true? Is it true that art is subjective? One answer is, it depends what you mean by subjective. Do you just mean that art is an abstract concept that can only be experienced through the eyes of a conscious creature? Well, in that case, it is quite clearly subjective. Or do you mean to say that art is purely subjective and there's no rhyme or reason to what people generally consider artistically beautiful? Well, the answer to that is undoubtedly no. Art is not purely subjective. In fact, if it were, the word art itself wouldn't make sense. In a purely subjective interpretation, art is what people think is art. And that definition doesn't make any sense. It doesn't explain anything. It's circular. So either you dispense with the word altogether, which is not very helpful, or you start to look at art in a different way. The question, what is art, or even what should the word art refer to, is certainly not one I can give a definitive answer to. Any definition currently within my grasp either fails to encapsulate the entire phenomenon or is so abstractly philosophical as to seem pointless. For example, I have a strong sense that art portrays what is true, and that this is not much different from portraying that which is good. But that's not very helpful right now, and it's already getting too abstract. So instead, let me offer you a more pragmatic view of art. The next time you play your favorite video game, listen to a piece of music you like, read a good book, or watch a great movie, pay attention to how you feel as you engage with the art. If it's a work you generally enjoy interacting with, such as your favorite video game, notice how you feel as you play the game. Most of the time, you're going to be enjoying yourself, completely absorbed in the experience. But then, at some point, you'll find a challenge in the game that has you stuck trying to beat it for 2 hours and you'll get frustrated. Or you'll be running around an area and notice that you're feeling bored. Maybe you're reading a part of your book that just doesn't make sense or feels forced or in some other way breaks your engagement with the art. If you're in the right state of mind, not too hungry, not too tired, not having a bad day, that loss of flow is a signal from your body that the art has likely missed the mark. The chapter could have been written better, the boss could have used some tweaks, the chorus needed more variation. That feeling that something is just not right, that feeling is what guides an artist to adjust part of his drawing so it looks more beautiful. It's the feeling that inspires the game developer to reimagine some features in his project to make it a better game. The feeling that allows a composer to adjust a piece of music so that it touches the soul even more deeply. Sometimes it's hard to know when to trust that feeling. Maybe you are just tired and every part of the game seems frustrating to you. Or maybe you're missing some element of interpretation that would show the art in a new light. Get something to eat, sleep on it for a few days, then come back. Does the boss still feel frustrating? Did your friends have a similar experience? Does every Hollow Knight YouTuber consistently rank it as one of the least fun bosses in the game? Then maybe there's some work to be done on the part of the developers. Maybe this portion of the artwork needs improvement. And notice how that word, improvement, implies a grander sense of good and bad, something outside the bounds of the merely subjective. Here's a definition of art. Art is an expression of truth, and like truth, good art speaks to your soul. When people talk about critically analyzing a video game, they'll often say the following. Well, you can comment on what you liked and disliked about the game, that's just your subjective opinion though. If you want to say something objective about the quality of the game, you can talk about frame rate, sound quality, and system requirements. What such individuals consistently fail to notice is that this is not critical analysis at all, it's a summary of statements. Given this view of objectivity, are there any grounds on which we can call a game better or worse? Well, certainly not with reference to the opinion of the reviewer. His is just the expression of subjectivity after all. But even when talking about seemingly more objective elements like frame rate and sound quality, can we really say that a higher frame rate is better? Or that a higher sample rate makes for better sound? Better in what sense, as defined by our subjective human preferences? Well, obviously not, since through this view of objectivity, we're not considering those personal preferences as objectively valid measurements of the good. So all we're left with is the ability to make the following kinds of statements. John says that he likes Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight can run at 60 frames per second. A piano is used in some of Hollow Knight's music. Statements like these do not constitute value judgments nor critical analysis. Why should you be interested in whether or not John likes Hollow Knight? Why are you watching a 14-minute long video of me talking about what makes for a poorly designed boss if all that amounts to, in your mind, is me sharing my personal opinion? Who cares? This is not critical analysis, folks. This is pure descriptivism. And it is the opposite of enlightening. Why does a video game developer spend time playtesting his game? Why? Why does he care what the average player thinks of the experience? To what end does he, once playtesting concludes, return to his computer and spend hours upon hours tweaking and reworking aspects of the game? If the experience of the player is purely subjective, why bother wasting time and money trying to improve the game? Why bother? If there is no objective quality to art, why does Michelangelo spend a year and a half sculpting the Pieta rather than simply smashing a bottle against the road and calling the broken shards art? And if you say, well, perhaps a greater number of people will find the Pieta more beautiful than a broken bottle, then you've just admitted that experience of the art is not purely subjective. If for every person who would consider the broken bottle art, 10,000 more would consider the Pieta art, what do we do with this fact? Is it random? Or does Michelangelo's sculpture get at something deeper that most people experience as beautiful? If this is not a reflection of some objective truth, then what is it? If you still resist that word objective, I don't care, call it intersubjective, whatever, that's not the point. The point is that it is certainly not, as should be crystal clear by now, purely subjective. Thanks for watching.